Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. In our previous session, we explored the idea of interactive reading. So I'm just going to see if it's going to actually let me press the buttons on the page. There we go. Interactive reading is reading with children rather than simply just reading to them. Interactive reading invites children to wonder, predict, question, and respond. It allows stories to become something we share together rather than something we're just listening to. Research consistently shows that when children are actively involved in storytelling, that their language development, comprehension, and engagement with books all increase. So today we're going to explore how we can take those same principles that we discussed last time outside, where stories can become even richer through movement, nature, and real experiences. When stories move outdoors, they often become memories rather than just moments. Session aims. I hope that when you all leave me tonight, I hope you'll feel at least one of these things. We are a really relaxed session, so just sit back, relax, and listen. But if you've got any questions throughout, please feel free to pop them in the chat, or I'm more than happy if anyone wants the camera on or to talk to me. That's absolutely fine. But as Natalie said, there will be option for a Q&A at the end too. But I know sometimes things come in your mind and you've just got to say it while you remember. So I've got absolutely no issues with that if anyone wants to jump in at any point. So. I will briefly recap. So, last time we talked about interactive reading. Now, we had focused on indoors, but interactive reading can be as simple as pausing during a story and asking children what they might think happens next, noticing what they're curious about, or allowing them to move, act, and respond to what they hear. Studies in early childhood literacy have found that children develop stronger vocabulary and narrative skills when adults engage them in conversation during the stories, rather than just reading straight from a book. Stories are not performances, they should be conversations. So, before we get stuck in, I'd love to hear from all of you guys. So, I've got a little question, and I wondered if you guys wouldn't mind just popping something in the chat, or if you'd rather speak, that's absolutely fine too. Um, where do stories currently happen in your setting? Where is the one place that you think, as soon as I ask that question, where you do stories? It doesn't have to be outside, doesn't have to be indoors. It's just wherever, whatever pops into your head, and there's no right or wrong answer. If you wouldn't mind popping a couple of things in the chat. I like that. Nappy change time, that's a really good one. Sofa garden. I love snuggling up on the sofa with a story. I looked across the earlier and there was three children all sat with books, just sat on the sofa. During lunch and snack time, lovely. Very watch trains. Before we sit. So we've got some lovely ones coming through and quite a variety, which is really nice because sometimes you find that the same places often come up. So it's really lovely that there's some real variety there that's coming up in the chat. So it's wonderful to see so many different environments represented, and it really sh is showing me that stories can travel anywhere, and I hope it's doing the same to you. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, if it will let me. There we go. Um, so stories don't have to stay inside. Sometimes reading becomes associated with that quiet indoor space, those book corners, those little reading rugs, cozy little nooks that you might have, sofas, as we mentioned. And those spaces are all wonderful. But stories don't only belong into buildings. In fact, storytelling began outdoors. If you think about going back in history, they were shared within communities around fires, on journeys, and even in everyday life. Stories belong wherever curiosity exists. So, why should we take stories outside? Outdoor interactive reading is about what happens when stories leave the four walls. Outdoors invites movement, curiosity, imagination, regulation, and many children who find indoor story times difficult can come alive outside. When we're taking stories outdoors, they stop being something we hold and they become something we can move through. Indoor interactive reading often centres on that closeness and shared focus, and whilst that's important and can still happen outdoors, outdoor stories are experienced a lot through body and senses. Movement and space with sensory input for children who learn best through action and exploration can really pull them into stories in a more engaged way. And outdoor interactive reading offers a different way for children who need to move to notice and experience stories rather than sitting and listening. So, how can we rethink outdoor reading? Now, outdoor reading can happen in gardens, playgrounds, parks, woodland areas, or simply just during everyday walks. Even pausing on a walk to read a page or share part of a story can create that meaningful moment of connection. And it's amazing where those stories can lead just from even just a little snippet of a story rather than even the whole book. So, outdoor environments offer something unique for children's development. They're providing space for movement, exploration, and sensory experiences that simply can't be replicated indoors. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm not tech savvy, and it's not been playing ball as Natalie will agree with. Right. Okay. So, research into outdoor learning shows that time spent outdoors supports children's well-being, confidence, their physical development, and their language skills. So, when we're combining books and outdoor experiences, we're creating opportunities for children to connect with language and connect with the world around them. Children remember stories more deeply when they can experience them with all their senses. So, um, if you were to take a book outdoors tomorrow, can you think of somewhere you've never tried to read a story? Um, Sometimes it might be somewhere you don't normally go, or you might not have thought to take a book. If anyone's got any really unusual ideas or something that you've not considered, I'll just ask you to pop them in the chat now, if that's okay, and we'll just see if anyone comes up with anything really different. Sometimes sharing ideas like this can help spark inspiration for everyone. I'll just give another minute in case anyone's got any ideas, and if not, I'll move on to making books accessible. Reading on the school run, that's lovely. Taking on outings. Yep. Just missed one up above from Gemma. Little bridges. Billy, oh, I love that. Yeah. The, the fact that you've gone to a bridge and thought of the story and acting that out. Take on outings all the time, not thought to take them on our daily school. Yeah, love that. So I have added in this slide about making stories accessible. So just like indoors, accessibility is key. If children can see books and reach them easily, they're much more likely to engage with them and engage with them independently. So really, we should always think of books as our part of our continuous provision, whether that's indoors or outdoors. Obviously, last session we focused on where we can and how we can incorporate them indoors. But books belong outdoors just as much as they do indoors. This could look as simple as a little basket of books that you have available for free choice with a small rotating selection that's maybe linked to children's interests. You might have a little cupboard if you've got an outdoor cupboard where you can store some books. You could have a backpack that you take with you on outdoor adventures and learning spaces. I have a forest school backpack that's got um, all sorts in there. Now, there's no single right way, but the key is accessibility, flexibility, and choice. Because we're not just sharing books, we are trying to shape relationships with reading. So some settings might choose waterproof baskets so you can keep them outside. So they can be quite reasonably priced options with that. And then obviously there's the more expensive ones where you've got the big wooden outdoor cupboards and things. I've used all sorts of different things over the time. I've previously had some of the waterproof plastic storage boxes, which are great, but you only normally get 1 year out of them because they become brittle and obviously you don't want any cracks and water getting in because at the end of the day we don't want to have to keep replacing the books all the time. It might be that you have a basket that you bring in and out. Um, Obviously it depends on how your setting's laid out, but the fact that having books accessible as part of the outdoor environment and becoming part of everyday play and discovery is really important. Mhm. So I've just got a few photos here of some places where I've used books within my setting and not just within the baskets, but ways that I've incorporated them with within weaved into everyday outdoor play areas and spaces. So things like having recipe books in mud kitchens so children can use them as they would an indoor kitchen, look through. It's just getting them used to different photos, different print, and obviously using that within their play. Gardening books, maybe with if you've got a planting area or you've got flowers about and things, you can get those really lovely magazines, often free from gardening centres. I like to spend a lot of time at a gardening centre, so I often pick up some of those. Transport books, you could have that with your cars or if you've got a bit of a construction area. Um, I appreciate that there may be areas that can't be books can't be left out all the time because obviously changes in weather and of course we are in Britain and it rains a lot, certainly does in Yorkshire. And there'll be times when they might not be able to be accessible where you'd maybe want to put them if it was a dry day. But just having those books outside and accessible, even if it's under a little covered area, if you've got a little small gazebo, pop-up gazebo, or a tent, or a little teepee, or Wendy house where you could put some in, just so children have access to them outside. Literacy lives within play, so it's really important that we incorporate that outside as well. Um, and when children are pretending to do things like follow recipes, they're already exploring early literacy concepts, such as sequencing, symbols, and it just really expands that knowledge. Now, books can support and deepen outdoor play rather than interrupt it because those that know me and my setting know we've got a pirate ship. Pirate stories can live near pirate ships and sand pits, construction books near diggers, cookbooks near mud kitchens, and stories that reflect children's current play interests all help with naturally connecting that reading with play. And books become tools for imagination and not just separate activities. They go hand in hand together. So, taking books on adventures. Um, we love adventures here. We love to go out in our local community. I know some of the people in this chat might go off adventuring further afield. You might go in the car and go to various places. You might have, lovely areas near you that you do walks to or play parks. Some of you may not have a garden, and you may really focus on outdoor adventures. Obviously, it depends on your cohort, your setup, but But reading doesn't need to be in a fixed place. It doesn't just need to be at your setting, whether that's inside or outside. Books can travel on walks. They can go in backpacks. They can go on school runs, even in pushchairs if you've got little ones that are non-walkers. Sometimes just sharing a book while waiting. So maybe you're waiting at school because you're picking up some older children. Just during those transitions can offer a calm connection. Reading doesn't need to be a destination because wherever children go, stories can follow. Some of the calmest reading moments can actually happen in those in-between moments where you're not necessarily doing something specifically, or the children aren't necessarily doing something specifically. Just having them available when you're out and about can be really impactful. Connection doesn't have to wait for a perfect setting, it can just be wherever you are. So, books are more than stories. Books also support children's natural curiosity about the world around them. This is something I love. We are very nature focused here. We do a lot of outdoor learning. So, in outdoor interactive reading can also include the non-fiction and discovery books. And this is something we really enjoy here, and the children do, my own children do. So we can offer things like nature guides, bird books with sounds, identification books, little spotters guides. I know some of the Wildlife Trust, RHS, and various other organisations do little spotter guides and flip books and charts. It doesn't have to even be a full book because, we've got some cards, nature cards, and they've got all the wildlife and things on. They can just really, really support the curiosity and investigation, and it gets children used to looking at printed words, photos. They're trying to obviously match up maybe animals or whatever it is that they're focused on at that moment. Um, they can revisit favorite fact books and develop a sense of wonder about the natural world. You can also then bring that back into the setting and they can explore that. For example, we've just started going back into insects because we're seeing the insects coming out a bit more. Previously, we were looking more at birds, but as I say, I'm very child-led, follow the children's interests, and they are focusing on insects at the moment. So we've been looking at that whilst we're out on our adventures. They've been accessible in the garden space, and then we've also brought some inside too, because that means that they can use those books to look at. We've got some little resin insects where they've got magnifying glasses and things, so they can use that indoors as well. So it's continuing that learning. It's not just that single moment, it can be extended across time. And when reading feels joyful and shared, it stays with them. And that's when we really embed that love of learning and that love of research and that love of um, books. So, I've put a few photos in here of some of the outdoor learning and books that we've been exploring. When children connect language to real experiences, their understanding of vocabulary and concepts becomes so much stronger. The books help children to name the wonders that they're discovering. That can be as simple as in there you can see we've got some colour books. So they literally have different colours on. They've got different pictures of um, flowers, plants, and things within nature that they can use to identify the colour. And it's amazing how that can encourage their focus and their concentration as they go around and spot. And that's something as simple as looking for different colours and having the word on the page of whatever that colour is and the different shades. A love of stories and books often begins in the smallest and the quietest moments. As you can see, sometimes the child's just sat down on the grass looking at it. Maybe it's a particular interest, like when we focused on mushrooms over the autumn period, birds over winter. So, another thing I wanted to incorporate here is interactive listening outdoors. So, um, listening to stories can become a lovely part of outdoor play. So that can be obviously reading stories, um, looking for the facts, but we can also use things like Tony boxes or audio stories. They don't just have to come from us, or from the children independently looking at books, during the quieter outdoor moments. We've taken our Tony box on adventures, particularly when there's maybe a focus of a specific story that the children have been enjoying, or just to have when we've done forest schooling and we've got some bits out there that we're learning and we've just got that there. But I also am always mindful and want to emphasize balance because obviously technology is amazing. We really like a Tony box, but I wouldn't want it on all the time because outdoor environments give children opportunity to listen to something equally as important, which is the sound of nature. So they could be listening to bird song, they could be listening to the wind and the leaves rustling, they could be listening to insects, we've got grasshoppers in the local fields and things like that. Nature itself can be a storyteller. And by listening to those sounds, you can create your own stories. And that can be equally as beneficial for the children. So they're using their imagination and curiosity, as well as yourselves, because we all know it can be tricky to make up stories on the spot. But the more we do it and the more we practice, the easier that becomes, and the more involved the children get, the more elaborate the stories become. That can also be really good as well if they've got a particular interest, for example, Um, like the birds. If you're listening to the bird song, you can make up the story about a bird. And if you don't feel confident in making up your own story, you can incorporate stories that you already know within whatever you're hearing. But it's just really good to get the children listening to the sounds around them too. So, stories through play. Um, When stories move outdoors, they naturally become more physical. So children do bigger gross motor movements. They've usually got more space, more freedom to move around. So we can really use that to our advantage for telling stories. Things like stomping like giants, maybe can we creep up like a fox? Can we splash like characters that are crossing rivers? Or can we build our own pirate ships? Things like this allow movement, and movement allows children to embody stories, not just hear them. And it's like they become part of the story. So when children are acting out stories, they're strengthening their memory, they're strengthening narrative understanding, they are expanding their imaginative thinking and their creativity, and they become more immersed. The story all of a sudden might have a different ending. It might have other things going on throughout it. They can retell it in their own way. I've put in there, we're going on a bear hunt, which is one that we often use because, as I've got a photo there, we might see footprints. So we use the environment to inspire those narratives. And this one was, we'd seen, it was clearly quite a large dog paw print, but to the children, that was a bear. And all of a sudden, we were going on the bear hunt. We were going through mud. We were going through the mud. We were going through the long, wavy grass, and we're moving. And we embodied that whole story um, during our adventure. If you can just see on the screen the list in yellow, I've added a couple of other familiar ones that quite often creep up with the children that are here at the young ones. So obviously there's, like I say, there's going on a bear hunt and the Gruffalo, which are probably quite well known. I'm sure there'll be most people, if not all, within the chat that know those stories. But other ones like the bog baby, that's really good because when we go to, we've got a pond near us, and that one often comes out in their play there. And again, they're using their imaginations. For those that don't know that story, you have to imagine the bog baby and what colour it will be, and the children all of a sudden start saying what their bog baby is like. Um, Another one. So as you can see in the photo, Poos and Clues swatch book. So my children think poo is absolutely fascinating. They're not the first children that I've come across that really, really like a bit of poo. But for those that are not familiar with the story of the little mole who knew it was none of his business, that's also based around poo. And the mole has to figure out who's pooed on his head, which my children absolutely love. And I've got some popping up here. That love the mole story. Yeah. Um, so we use the identification book as well. So that often crosses over from the story into the actual fact book of finding poo. So when we go on our adventures, um, we often see rabbit poo, various types of poo, and then we use our Poos and Clues swatch book to find out what poo it is and identify who the culprit might be for the poo. So I know it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but my children absolutely love it. So I'm just trying to show there that stories can be expanded and their imagination and their curiosity grow just from simple things such as finding some poo. I will move on to the next slide if it'll let me. Oh, too far. I don't, have I gone too far? Oh, there we go. So, storytelling through exploration. Um, I love using nature to incorporate within our stories. So you might have lots of story props at your setting, and the type of story props we were talking about last time were things like puppets and figures, and there's so many different types of props that you might have inside that you can also bring outside. Those things can be brought out. We often in summer might have we've got a shaded tent and bring the puppets out and have the puppets and the books in there so children can explore. But you can also create your own. You could make your own stick men from sticks. Children could decorate stones. If you're particularly creative yourself, you could have a go at making your own story stones or story props from natural resources. But children's imaginations are wonderful, aren't they? And they can turn the pine cone into whatever they want it to be. So just having the option of those loose parts, those natural loose parts within your garden or when you're out and about or collecting things in a basket can really help uh, support storytelling. Um, There's obviously just a few ideas on the slide, and I know many of you will already be doing things like this in your own settings. But often the most meaningful literacy moments happen when we're simply following children's curiosity and allowing them the freedom and opportunity to expand on that in a way that's meaningful to them. Just going to read what's popping up in the chat. We call it forest shopping when we get, yeah, I love that. That's great. So here are some simple ways that you can bring stories outdoors. Like I say, I know a lot of you will probably be doing these already, but hopefully there might be something that you've not considered there, or maybe that you could do in a different place because we are all guilty, myself included, where sometimes we just go into a bit of a routine of doing things a certain way. And sometimes it just takes someone saying, "Oh, have you tried it that way?" Or "Why don't you do it there?" Or just varying it that tiny bit. And the engagement can be massive, even down to I can have a resource out and literally move it a few feet. And all of a sudden, the children realize that it's there again. Because we can all, adults, children, look past things sometimes, can't we? Um, and sometimes it's really important to just all of us reflect. I'm constantly learning. I'm always saying, if a day's gone by and I've not learned something new, I've done something wrong because the children teach me just as much, if not more, than I'm trying to teach them. Um, I will leave that up for another few seconds and then I'm going to move on to the next page. Before I do as well, I've got to apologise. On the next slide, I realised when I got this up that I was meant to add a couple of pictures of some of my younger ones when they were younger, but they've all of mine are now 3 and 4. So my next slide is, oh no, actually some photos. I forgot that was there. Um, Before I move on then, I'll talk about these. Here are some examples of things that we have done in the past couple of weeks. So these are all very fresh and new, based around what the children were interested at the time. So we took some books, as we regularly do, on some of our forest schooling. Just I like to have books accessible when we are going on our adventures. So we have fact books and stuff. There's a couple, I think, in there, yeah, peeping inside the forest and stuff, but also stories and a couple of story props just that children could access in between their adventure. We took the Tony box with us on a bear hunt and we went looking for bears. We'd taken a few Tonys with us, and that was the one that ended up naturally going into that. I'd not even got the Tony box out at that point. They were telling me the bear hunt, and then they told me the story, and we listened to it, and we went on our adventure, and the story changed, and they retold it back, and they were singing to me, and it was beautiful. As I mentioned briefly, the children have been really enjoying insects. And all of a sudden, Hungry Caterpillars come back out to play because we've not listened to that one for quite a while. And now we've listened to it numerous times in the past couple of weeks. So they have been sequencing, sorry, some of our story stones in the garden. They were using some of our yellow door resources to explore and listening to the Hungry Caterpillar story with it. If anyone's got the Tony box, they actually have some facts after as well, and the children were going looking for some of the bugs and listening to the facts, and then enjoyed retelling them to their parents at home. We've also had, and they were dressed up as butterflies as well because they wanted to be the caterpillar that transformed into the butterfly. Also, having stories accessible, the children have been using some of our um, loose part crates to make a bit of a book boat, and they were making their own zones to sit in and have books. I've supported some of the local settings as well, and they've got what's called book boats, and they are literally um, a plastic container with a bit of a lid, and they can close one side of the lid and they put cushions in and blankets and things, and the children can take books. And I know the local school has some too. So some people find that really beneficial, as well as obviously having cozy nooks, such as we've got a teepee, and we've also got one that's a nature teepee where I made it myself, just with, I say I made it myself. I actually roped my brother in because I'm not very handy with a tool. I had the vision, he just made it. Um, Two pieces of trellis and a bit of old pallet, all screwed together with some nature plants growing up it. And that's really nice because, again, I think it allows children the opportunity to sit within nature because they're sat under um, the plants that are growing up to look at books. And I know it's been a really popular place for reading. The only problem is not so great in winter when it's chucking it down because they just get wet. Um, but on a dry day, it's great. This was the page I was trying to refer to before. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted books and babies because I appreciate a lot of the things that I have been discussing is from toddlers up. But when you've got really young babies, they experience stories very differently from the older children. For them, wherever they are, whether it's indoors or outdoors, stories are often about voice, rhythm, connection, sensory experience. And obviously, where better to have the sensory experience than outdoors in nature? So there's simple ways we can support that. We can take them to areas maybe they've not experienced as much. Maybe the baby hasn't been on real grass before, and we can take them out into a field or into an opening with grass, and they can sit and you could read a book under a tree, feeling the wind on them, touching the grass, feeling the leaves, allowing them to listen to the sounds around them. For them, for babies, the story is often actually the experience itself. It might be that you can read a story in a sandpit and they're feeling something different around them. You could change the tone of your voice. As I say, outdoor reading is key for these sensory development and that link and that love of reading, but it can be as simple as just reading a book in a different setting, different space for babies and really young children to get that connection between enjoyment and reading, which is what it's all about. Um, However we read, wherever we read, for all children, we're just trying to embed that love of reading that hopefully will travel with them far beyond their early years. So, supporting story experiences. As I've mentioned, we want to notice children's interests and their curiosities, look at our environment, look at where we can make books accessible, and expand and follow the direction of their play. If they're not interested in a particular book, it's not necessarily because they're not enjoying books or they're not enjoying reading. Maybe it's just not the one for them. Maybe it's because we've picked a book about pirates, but they're really interested in bugs. If we can use their interest and their direction and incorporate that within their play, um, then we can use language to extend their thinking and allow them to really become immersed in their play. Um, Stories have always been part of human experience from the beginning of time. They've been shared under trees, during journeys, and within communities. We can bring whatever learning we try and bring indoors, outdoors, and we can make those movements bigger and um, more expressive. We can bring invitations to play outdoors. We can take books with us on our travels. Outdoor interactive reading invites us to reconsider how and where reading happens. When when stories are allowed to move with children and continue that journey, reading becomes something that they're living rather than something that they're just leaving behind and closing a door on. Um, Outdoor storytelling supports connection, imagination, regulation, and again, like have tried to say throughout this, it's really trying to embed that lifelong love of stories. The way children are experiencing stories now shapes how they feel about reading later. So when we're taking books outside with children, we want to reconnect storytelling with the curiosity, the imagination, and the natural world. And often these are the stories that children remember for a lifetime. Thank you. I will ask Natalie to stop recording and then